Hey guys, Mr. Johansson here. I want to talk about free body diagrams. Free body diagrams are a way of seeing into the forces acting on an object. I'm holding a ball here. Why is it staying there? What's going on when I'm just holding the ball? All right, it's pressing down in my hand and I'm pushing back up on it. That's why it's not changing its motion. It's just sitting here. Now, if I stop pushing up on it, down it goes. Right? We traditionally use kilogram masses to start talking about this. Man, you can really feel that pressing down in your hand. If my hand wasn't pressing up on it, or wasn't pushing up as hard as it's pushing down, the thing would be falling down. If I push up harder than it's pushing down, I can accelerate it upward. So let's talk about these free body diagrams. So free body diagrams, traditionally we draw a circle, sometimes. If you'd like, you could get creative and draw a square. Your choice. But we want to identify the forces acting on an object, and through doing that, we get to see what kind of motion that object is going to experience. Now, all things work this way. First of all, we have the object's weight. Weight is a vector quantity, meaning there's both a magnitude and a direction associated with it. Well, what's the direction of your weight? Neat. Your weight is exactly straight down towards the center of the earth, such that somebody 5 miles away, their weight is pointing in a somewhat noticeably different direction than my weight, because there's enough of an angle between us that on the round earth, the centers are a little bit different. The Verrazano Narrows Bridge, huge bridge connecting New Jersey and Long Island. I think that's it. I haven't been over it in a long time. But the towers are notable on the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. The towers are so far apart that they're not parallel to each other. Now, you can't really see it, but the towers are slightly at an angle. That angle had to be calculated based on the circumference of the earth so that the towers were standing exactly straight up. You need those towers to stand straight up. So parallel with each other when they're that far apart wouldn't fly, because then they're not both standing straight up. So your weight is a quantity that acts exactly down. Call it W for weight. Well, if that's all that's happening, start screaming because you're falling. You're accelerating towards the ground. Like to not do that? Well, you need to stand on something. How about a floor? Why don't we stand on a floor? All right? And how hard up should that floor push? Well, if it's only pushing that hard, that's like an elevator accelerating downward really fast. Don't want to do that? How about we push up just as hard as that's the same size as that? How about we push down just as hard, or push up just as hard as you're pushing down? If that's the case, you are either moving at constant velocity up or down. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference if you're, say, in an elevator, or you're standing still. If you're standing on a floor, that's a good floor. It's pushing up on you just as hard as you're pushing down. But imagine me standing on this floor, and maybe I get to a part of the floor that's just made of paper over a big pit. Will that paper be able to push me up? I think you'd recognize I might have some trouble. Which part of these arrows would be gone in that case? Correct. I would still have the same weight, but in this case, the arrow pushing me up is so very tiny, because paper can't push up very hard, as to be inconsequential. And down I go. So let's have them balanced. How about talk a car? We are in a car at rest, and we want to start moving forward. Call forward going to the right. So I start with a force applied. Oh, I should name this force too. What is the force pushing up? Well, the force pushing up, we have a special name for it, and there's a couple different names you can use, but the typical one is called the normal force. Normal meaning perpendicular. So it's not always straight up. If the floor is tilted, it's pointing straight out of the floor. But in this case, the beginning, we'd call this force normal. So F sub n is traditional to use for force normal. But here I have a force applied, that's the engine pushing my car forward. Now, as I begin going forward in my car, you'll recognize air friction comes into play. So those two forces start working on each other. If I have a very large force, I might get going very fast. Why don't I just keep going faster and faster? Hold your hand out the window, you realize right away. There's a lot of air friction. So with that force applied, I start going faster and faster. Pretty soon I have a force of friction just as large. So this would be all the forces acting on a car moving at, say, 55 miles an hour on a straight, level road. If I reach over and turn the engine off, does the car continue forever? Well, certainly not. What happens? Well, if I turn the engine off, here's what's going on. So my up and down forces are still balanced. I'm not falling off a bridge or anything. But without any engine force, all I have is the frictional force on the air, and that's going to be slowing me down. So which way would I be accelerating in that direction? My velocity, I hope you can see, is in that direction. But which way would I be accelerating? In other words, moving my velocity in that direction. Well, you know I'm slowing down. That's a negative acceleration, right? So my acceleration would be that way. If my velocity is in one way and my acceleration is in the other, what's happening to my velocity? I'm reducing it, okay? Negative acceleration. These are free body diagrams. Free body diagrams, FBD. Really important. To get the sense of what's happening in them, I want to do a quick sequence of jumping out of an airplane. All right? We're doing it safely here on the ground. So you're in the airplane, flying along, and we're just going to be talking about the up and down forces, not the side-to-side forces, just for simplicity. So you're in the airplane. The airplane is pushing up on you. It has lift from its wings. It's pushing up on you. You have your weight pulling down. All right? Great. Now, for some reason, you decide to jump out of the airplane. Make sure you bring a parachute, but if you jump out of the airplane, which force is missing? The up force. The plane isn't pushing on you. The air isn't pushing on you. You're just falling. All right? So this is your weight. That's the normal force. Now you just have your weight. Down you go. You're accelerating faster and faster. As you get accelerating faster and faster, the wind starts picking up on you, and you finally get to what they call terminal velocity, okay? And this is the force of friction, air friction on you. For a human being falling from an airplane, it's on the order of about 200 miles an hour you can get falling. You can go pretty fast. But by the time you're at 200 miles an hour, the wind going past you is moving so hard you can't accelerate any faster. If you can't accelerate, that means the forces must be in balance, okay? At this point, the forces are not in balance, and you can't do anything other than accelerate. So the difference in these two things, here you're accelerating, here you're not. If all the forces are in balance, acceleration is zero. So we could say acceleration is proportional to the net force. The net force is the leftover force. After you subtract all the other forces, if there's a force left over, you're accelerating because you have a net force acting on you. So how about this? Correct, net force. How about this? No net force. So in which are you accelerating? Correct. All right? How about this? You accelerating this one? Nope. Forces are balanced. No net force, no acceleration. This always works like that. So you're falling and falling, getting close enough to the ground. Seems like time to pull your parachute. All right? So you pull your parachute. How does that feel when you pull your parachute? Perhaps you make the sound "Whoa!" when the parachute opens and slows you down so hard. The harness that you're wearing, suddenly you realize why you're wearing this big harness. It goes around your legs too and straps you in, because that harness suddenly is yanking you up with tremendous force. So I have to move you down a little bit like that. Your weight is still acting like that, but now, instead of the old force of friction from just your body going through the air, now you have the force of friction of the whole parachute suddenly opened. And for a brief moment, the force of friction really is a lot greater than your weight. Hey, which way are you accelerating? Now, we know your velocity can't suddenly go up. When the parachute opens, if you suddenly change your velocity to an upward direction, you're going to run into the parachute, tangle up, and it's not going to work out well. So your velocity continues down, But for a while, you have a tremendous acceleration in the upward direction. Remember, you were going like 200 miles an hour on your way down? So suddenly to have the parachute open and slow you to 20 miles an hour, well, that means you have reduced your velocity tremendously. That's a deceleration or a negative acceleration. So you have an acceleration in that direction, a substantial acceleration. Slows you right down till you're about 20 miles an hour. All right, great. So you're getting closer and closer and closer. Finally, you hit the ground, and when you hit the ground, there's your weight. But when you hit the ground, what happens? Well, they teach you have to roll out or land really carefully, bend your knees and roll with it, because if you don't, a friend of mine broke his ankle when he landed. There's a huge upward force the ground pushes on you. If you jump from like 8 feet high, you're going to hit the ground really hard. You need to sort of tuck and roll when you hit the ground. Otherwise, that tremendous upward force, you're accelerating upward again. That tremendous upward force can hurt your body. So again, you have, now it's the normal force acting on you again. And again, you have an upward acceleration, which simply means your velocity, which was in the downward direction, is now reduced to 0. So these are all the free body diagrams jumping out of an airplane. So I hope that explains the idea of free body diagrams for you a little bit. Thanks for watching.